The wind whipped her hair into her face. All around stretched the broken land, red cliffs, dry brush, and silence deep enough to make her ache inside. Somewhere far off, a coyote howled. It sounded like a prayer that had lost its way. Clara had once been the wife of a soldier. She knew how to keep walking even when her legs trembled. Just 1 more mile, she told herself. There has to be water, shelter. But the sun sank lower and no cabin or campfire greeted her, only the long shadows of rock spires. By the time dusk bled across the desert, she could barely see straight. Her boots were torn, her skirts heavy with dust. When her foot caught on a root and she fell again, she didn't rise. The sand felt cool against her cheek and she almost welcomed the pull of sleep. Then she saw it, a flicker of light in the distance. A fire. At first she thought her mind was playing tricks. But no, there it was, a living glow tucked between canyon walls, steady and warm. Hope burned sharper than fear. She pushed herself up and began to crawl, her limbs stiff as driftwood. The closer she came, the more she could smell smoke and hear the faint crackle of burning mesquite. When she reached the edge of the small clearing, she froze. A man sat by the fire. He was tall, lean, bare-chested, his skin bronze under the flames. Long black hair fell over his shoulders and his eyes, dark as obsidian, lifted sharply at the sound of her stumbling. He didn't move at first. Neither did she. Clara knew at once what he was, Apache. Her breath caught. She'd heard the stories told by settlers and soldiers alike, raids, ambushes, scalps. Her heart thundered in her chest. But the man made no move to threaten her. He simply looked at her, gaze unreadable, as though weighing whether she was spirit or flesh. Her knees gave out, and she sank to the ground. I'm lost, she managed, voice raw from thirst. I didn't mean to trespass. I just need water. For a long moment, the only sound was the wind moving through the canyon. Then the man rose slowly, deliberately. His movement was silent, graceful like a wolf crossing shallow snow. He reached to his side and picked up a water skin. With a single step forward, he extended it toward her. Clara hesitated, watching his face for any sign of cruelty. There was none. Only patience, caution. She took the skin and drank, the water cool and startlingly sweet. Her throat ached with relief. When she handed it back, their fingers brushed and she flinched at the warmth of his skin. He said something in his language, soft, low, musical. She shook her head, not understanding. Then he gestured toward the fire, toward the empty ground across from him. The meaning was clear enough. Sit. Clara wanted to run, but her body had nothing left to give. So she sank near the fire, her hands trembling. The man returned to his seat, silent again, his eyes never leaving her. She saw now the faint bandage on his shoulder, the torn edge of cloth where blood had once dried. He was hurt, wounded, yet alert as any predator. She tried to speak, to thank him, but her lips barely moved. Exhaustion won. Her head drooped, her vision blurred, and the desert faded into darkness. The last thing she felt was warmth, the steady crackle of fire, the hush of breath from across the flames, and the strange, impossible comfort of knowing that for one night she wasn't alone. When Clara awoke, dawn was already brushing the canyon walls in gold. The fire had burned down to glowing embers, and a thin thread of smoke curled lazily into the pale sky. For a moment she couldn't remember where she was, only that her body ached. Her mouth was dry and something inside her stirred with the awareness of being watched. Then she saw him. The Apache sat across the fire, crouched low, sharpening a knife with slow, rhythmic strokes. His movements were steady, controlled, yet she could sense the power in him, the kind that didn't need words or weapons to make itself known. When his eyes met hers, she flinched and sat up too fast, clutching her shawl around her shoulders. He didn't speak right away. He simply studied her, like a man trying to decide whether the creature in front of him was a threat or something fragile that had wandered too close to the flame. Her heart pounded. She wanted to stand, to thank him for the water, to explain she'd be on her way, but when she put weight on her leg, pain shot up her ankle. She'd twisted it the night before. A small helpless sound escaped her. He noticed. The knife stopped. Then without a word he rose. Clara's breath hitched. Every story she'd ever heard about Apache men flashed in her mind. Merciless warriors, hunters of settlers. But when he stepped into the light, she saw not a killer, but a man carrying his own weariness. His right shoulder was wrapped in a strip of cloth dark with blood that had seeped through during the night. The bandage looked crude, the edges frayed. She pointed to it before she could stop herself. "You're hurt." He looked down at his shoulder, then back at her. "No hurt," he said in broken English, but his wince betrayed the lie. Clara hesitated. Every instinct told her to keep her distance, yet another part, something quieter, older, told her she couldn't just watch someone suffer. Her husband had been a soldier, a kind man who'd once said, "When you stop helping people, Clara, you stop being human." With trembling hands, she tore a strip from her petticoat. "Let me," she whispered. He frowned, uncertain of her intent, then nodded once. Carefully she approached. The closer she came, the more she could feel the heat of him. The sun-browned skin, the faint smell of smoke and earth. When she reached his side, she saw the wound clearly, a deep slice, angry and red, probably from a blade. He must have been ambushed recently. She dipped the cloth in a small pot of water near the fire and began cleaning the cut. He didn't flinch, though she saw his jaw tighten. "You should have stitched this," she murmured. He gave a low grunt that might have been amusement. "No needle," he said simply. Her eyes flicked to a small pouch among his things. Mending tools, flint, dried herbs, a few animal bones. "You have thread but no needle?" she asked. He met her gaze, and for the first time something like a smile ghosted across his lips. "Needle broke," he said. She nodded, focused again on her task. For a while, there was only the sound of wind in the canyon and the quiet drip of water. She pressed the bandage into place, tying it firmly with her torn cloth. When she finally looked up, his eyes were on her, steady, unreadable, but not cold. "Thank you," he said, the words careful, deliberate. Clara blinked. She hadn't expected him to speak English beyond fragments. The sound of his voice, low and rough, stirred something inside her she couldn't name. "You're welcome," she said softly. Brushing dirt from her hands, he reached for his satchel, pulled out a small piece of dried meat and held it out to her. "Eat," he said. She hesitated, then took it. Hunger overcame pride. She ate slowly, aware of his gaze. There was no hostility in it now, only a quiet curiosity, like he was still deciding what kind of woman fate had dropped in front of him. As the fire crackled between them, Clara realized something. She wasn't just a trespasser anymore. She was part of his morning, his space, his silence, and though she didn't yet know his name, something in her chest whispered that the desert had brought her here for a reason. The desert changed after sundown. What had been a furnace by day became a pit of chill and shadow by night. The heat fled with the sun, and the wind cut sharper than a blade. Even the canyon walls seemed to breathe cold. Clara wrapped her shawl tighter around her shoulders, but the thin wool did little against the bite of the air. Her fingers had long gone numb, and her teeth chattered as she sat near the dying fire. Across from her, the Apache, she still didn't know his name, moved with quiet purpose. He crouched low, feeding sticks into the flames, his movements sure and economical. She watched the way his hands worked, the calloused strength in them, the precision that came from years of surviving where others wouldn't last a week. "Cold," she murmured, rubbing her arms. He looked up briefly. "Desert," he replied, as if that explained everything. She managed a weak laugh. "Yes, dessert." He rose to his full height and walked to a pile of brush he had gathered earlier, bringing back more wood. As he dropped it onto the fire, sparks flew into the night air, vanishing like tiny stars. For a moment, the flames leapt higher, painting his face in light and shadow. He was younger than she'd first thought, perhaps 30, but there was something in his eyes that belonged to a much older man. "Tomorrow," he said, nodding toward the east. "Sun come." "You go." It wasn't a question. It was a statement of fact. She nodded anyway. "Yes, I'll go." But even as she said it, her heart twisted. The truth was, she had no idea where she'd go. Her wagon was gone. Her horse could be dead. And the trail. She didn't even know if she could find it again. The world beyond this canyon felt too wide, too cruel. As darkness deepened, the fire dimmed again. The Apache glanced toward her, frowning slightly as he noticed her trembling. He threw another log onto the flames, but it barely helped. The cold was too deep now, creeping in from all sides. Clara curled up tighter, trying to preserve what little warmth she had. Her breath came out in small clouds. She thought of her husband, of how he used to pull her close on nights like this, whispering that no storm or winter could take her from him. She'd buried him 2 winters ago, and still, she woke some nights reaching for a man who wasn't there. When she looked up, the Apache was watching her again. His eyes were unreadable in the flickering firelight. For a long moment he said nothing. Then he reached down and lifted one side of his thick buffalo blanket. "Come," he said simply. She blinked, startled. "What?" He gestured again, firm, patient. "Cold kills," he said. "No fire, no blanket. You die." Her breath caught. The way he said it wasn't harsh, just honest. Still her pulse raced. The idea of lying beside a stranger, an Apache warrior, sent every proper instinct in her spinning. "I'll be fine," she murmured, pulling her shawl tighter. He gave a small shake of his head as if amused by her stubbornness. "You're not fine," he said. Then softer, "Warmth is life." No shame, Clara hesitated. The wind howled down the canyon, sharp as glass. She shivered uncontrollably now, her fingers too stiff to move. Pride had no place here. Survival did. Slowly, she crawled closer to the fire, closer to him. He shifted, making room beneath the blanket. When she stopped just short, he said nothing, just lifted it higher, waiting. Her heart pounded so hard she could hear it. She whispered, barely audible, "Where will I sleep?" His gaze met hers, steady, calm, protective. "Beside me," he said. For a heartbeat, the world seemed to hold still. Then she nodded once, trembling more from nerves than cold, and slipped under the heavy hide. The warmth hit her immediately. The blanket smelled of smoke and leather. His body radiated heat like a small sun. He didn't touch her, didn't move closer, only lay there breathing slow and steady. She closed her eyes, unsure what she felt. Fear, gratitude, or something deeper. But as the wind howled outside and the fire crackled low, her shaking eased. For the first time since the storm, she felt safe. When sleep finally claimed her, she dreamed not of loneliness, but of the steady rhythm of his heartbeat beside her in the dark. The night stretched long and soundless, broken only by the whisper of wind against the canyon walls and the slow, even breath of the man beside her. Clara lay stiff at first, acutely aware of every inch of space between them, and every inch that wasn't. The weight of the buffalo blanket pressed over them both, heavy and warm. She could hear his heartbeat faintly, steady as a drum under the surface of still water. It shouldn't have been comforting. But it was. Her eyes flicked toward him in the dim light. His face was turned away, dark hair spilling over his shoulder, the lines of his back marked by muscle and scars. Old scars, faded ones that spoke of battles fought long before this night. There was strength in him, yes, but something gentler too. Restraint. She breathed out slowly. "I'm not used to this," she murmured, not expecting him to answer. To her surprise, he did. "You afraid?" She hesitated. "No," she lied softly. Then, after a pause, "Maybe a little." He turned his head slightly, just enough that his voice reached her. "No hurt," he said simply, and she believed him. For a long time they lay like that, 2 strangers beneath one blanket, divided by silence and centuries of mistrust, yet bound together by the oldest law of the desert, survival through warmth. When sleep came, it was deep and dreamless. The first light of dawn crept through the canyon, washing the stone in soft pinks and golds. The fire had burned down to ash, and a thin veil of frost glimmered on the ground outside the shelter. Clara stirred, blinking awake. For a moment she forgot where she was. Then she felt it, the heat beside her, the gentle rise and fall of his chest. Her heart skipped. She eased herself away, careful not to wake him, though every small movement made the blanket rustle, but he was already awake. "Morning," he said quietly, voice husky from sleep. Clara froze, caught between embarrassment and gratitude. "Morning," she replied, her cheeks warming. He sat up, pulling the blanket around his shoulders like a cloak. The air between them felt different now, less dangerous, more human. He gestured toward the embers. "Fire dead, need wood." She nodded, grateful for something to do. As she rose, she realized her leg didn't ache as much. The swelling had gone down thanks to rest and his care. She gathered twigs near the canyon mouth, trying not to stare at him, but her eyes betrayed her. There was something captivating about the way he moved, quietly, efficiently, like part of the land itself. She wondered how many nights he'd spent like this, hidden away from the world that had tried to erase him. When she returned, he had already sparked new flame. The fire sprang to life with a crackle. He handed her a strip of dried meat. "Eat," he said again. She smiled faintly. "You always this bossy?" He blinked, uncertain what she meant. Then, catching her tone, he gave the smallest of smiles. "Apache way," he said. "You eat, you live." Clara chewed slowly, warmth spreading through her chest. "You have a name?" she asked. "Taza," he said. She repeated it carefully, tasting the sound. "Taza," he nodded once. "And you?" "Clara." He looked at her for a long moment, then said softly, "Good name." Silence settled between them again, but it wasn't the uneasy kind. It was the kind that comes when words aren't needed. When she finally met his eyes again, she said what she'd been thinking since dawn. "Thank you. For last night." Taza tilted his head. "For what?" "For keeping me warm. For not letting me die out here." He studied her a moment, then said in that low, calm tone of his, "Desert take life fast. You fight. You strong. Desert see that?" Her throat tightened. It had been a long time since anyone had called her strong. As the sun climbed higher, painting the canyon in gold, she realized something strange. She didn't want to leave. Not yet. The world beyond this canyon was harsh and lonely, but here, with this quiet man who spoke few words and carried the desert in his bones, she felt something she hadn't felt in years, safe. Still, she asked the question that lingered on her tongue since the night before. "Taza," she whispered, almost shyly, "where will I sleep tonight?" He looked at her then, eyes glinting like dark amber in the firelight. Without a word, he reached for the blanket, pulled it back, and said softly, almost a vow, "Beside me." The second morning came slow and gentle. A soft wind slipped through the canyon, stirring the scent of smoke, sagebrush, and the faint sweetness of desert bloom. The sun had not yet climbed the ridge, but its light already painted the rocks in hues of rose and gold. Clara stirred beneath the buffalo blanket, blinking against the brightness. For a long moment she didn't move, only listened to the small sounds of the waking desert. A hawk's cry, the rustle of sand beneath some unseen creature's feet, the steady rhythm of another's breath beside her. Then she remembered Taza. He was kneeling by the fire, his back to her, grinding something in a small clay bowl. His long hair caught the early light, gleaming like black silk, and for a fleeting second she thought he looked almost unreal, as though carved from the same earth and sun that shaped this wild land. When he turned, she saw that he was mixing herbs. "For hurt," he said, touching his shoulder. "You help." "Now I help," she smiled faintly. "I thought you said it didn't hurt." He gave a small shrug. Apache not speak all truth when pain inside. That made her laugh softly. "Men are the same everywhere." He tilted his head as if trying to decide if that was an insult or a compliment. Then he smiled. A real smile this time, small but genuine. Taza dipped his fingers into the paste and spread it across the wound, the muscles of his arm flexing as he worked. Clara watched quietly, realizing just how much she'd misjudged him the night she stumbled into his camp. Everything she'd been told about his kind, dangerous, savage, untamable, seemed to melt away with every calm, deliberate gesture he made. After a while, he spoke again. "You go home?" Clara's heart twisted. "Home?" she echoed softly. "There's no home anymore. My husband's gone. My farm was sold after the drought. I was heading west, hoping to start over." He nodded, eyes thoughtful. "Start over good. Hard but good." She poked at the fire absently with a stick. "And you? Do you have a home?" Taza's gaze drifted toward the far side of the canyon, where the land stretched wide and endless. "Tribe far north now. Soldiers come. Take land, take horses. We move." His voice was calm, but she heard the ache beneath it, the same ache she carried. "I'm sorry," she whispered. He looked at her then, his dark eyes catching hers. "No sorry. Life change. Like river. You follow or drown." The words struck her deeply. He said them simply, yet they carried the kind of wisdom born from losing everything and still standing. When the sun finally crested the canyon, warmth filled their small camp. Taza handed her a piece of roasted rabbit still steaming. "Eat. Long walk today," he said. She took it gratefully. "Where are we going?" "Spring, fresh water." "Safe place." The idea of safety made her chest tighten. She wasn't sure if it was safety from the world or the strange pull she felt toward the man walking beside her that frightened her more. They packed what little they had. Taza tied his bow and quiver to his back, then handed her a strip of leather rope. "Hold, walk behind. Trail narrow." Clara followed as he led her along the canyon's edge. The path was steep and scattered with loose rock. Twice she stumbled, and each time Taza caught her arm. Quick, steady, wordless. His grip was strong but never harsh. It was a kind of quiet protection she'd long forgotten men were capable of. By midday they reached the spring he'd spoken of, a clear, shimmering pool hidden beneath overhanging stone. Birds fluttered in the shallows, and the sound of water trickling over rock was like music after so much silence. Clara knelt, cupping water into her palms, and drank deeply. "It's beautiful," she murmured. Taza watched her, a faint smile playing on his lips. "Desert give life if you respect her," he said. "Same as woman." She looked up sharply, surprised by the softness in his tone. Their eyes met, and for the first time neither of them looked away. The air between them thickened, not with danger but with something unspoken, fragile and real. Then quietly, he broke the spell. "Rest now. I watch." She lay down on a bed of soft sand near the spring, the sound of water and wind lulling her into calm. As her eyes drifted shut, she thought of how strange it was that she'd found peace in the arms of a man the world had taught her to fear, maybe the desert, knew better than the world, maybe this was the start she'd been searching for all along. By the time the sun began to sink, the spring had turned to liquid gold beneath the evening light. Clara and Taza had spent the day in a quiet rhythm. He hunting, she mending what she could of her torn skirt and broken spirit. They spoke little, but silence between them no longer felt like a wall. It felt like an understanding. Clara had started to learn his ways, how he read the ground for signs of life, how he could hear what the land said in the whisper of wind and the shift of birds. To her, the desert had always been an enemy, something to survive. To him, it was home, and slowly, his peace had begun to seep into her bones. But peace in the desert was fragile. Taza froze suddenly where he knelt near the water. His head tilted, eyes narrowing toward the horizon. "Riders," he said under his breath. Clara's heart jumped. "Apache?" she asked quickly. He shook his head, voice tightening. "Bluecoats." She didn't need him to explain. U.S. cavalry soldiers, the very men who'd once been her husband's comrades, and the same who hunted men like Taza. "How many?" she whispered. Taza's gaze sharpened. "4, maybe 5. Come fast." He moved quickly, sweeping away traces of their fire, covering footprints, dousing what little smoke lingered. His movements were silent and precise, years of survival distilled into action. He grabbed his bow and gestured sharply for her to move. "There," he said, pointing to a cluster of rocks deeper in the canyon. Clara's pulse thundered. She followed him, stumbling over loose gravel. The canyon twisted narrow and dark, the air cooler, shadows deepening around them. Taza found a narrow overhang barely tall enough for them both to fit beneath. He crouched low, motioning for her to stay silent. Moments later, the rhythmic thud of hooves echoed through the canyon. Clara pressed a trembling hand to her mouth, trying not to breathe too loud. Dust drifted in the fading light as the riders appeared. 4 soldiers in sun-bleached uniforms, rifles slung over their shoulders. From where they hid, Clara could see their faces. One man, a young corporal, rode with a casual slouch, the kind of arrogance only soldiers had when they thought themselves untouchable. Another scanned the terrain, frowning. "Tracks end here," the corporal muttered. "Could be an Apache scout. Might have doubled back." "Could be," the other said. "Or maybe just coyotes." "Coyotes don't wear boots," the corporal shot back. Clara's heart stopped. Boots. Hers. The men dismounted, checking the ground. One of them picked up something, a small scrap of torn cloth. Her heart sank. A piece of her dress. She turned to Taza in panic. His expression didn't change. He leaned close, so near she could feel his breath on her cheek, and whispered, "No move, no sound." They waited as the soldiers searched. One came dangerously close to the overhang. Clara could see his shadow slide across the stone just a few feet away. Her chest tightened until she thought she'd choke. She could feel Taza's hand, steady and warm, press against her wrist, silently anchoring her to stillness. Then, mercifully, a voice called from the distance, "Lieutenant, more tracks up ahead." The corporal cursed, mounted his horse again, and rode off with the others. The sound of their hoofbeats faded slowly into the hills. Clara exhaled shakily, realizing only then that she'd been holding her breath the whole time. "They would have shot you," she whispered. "Without even asking who you were." Taza's jaw tightened. "They shoot first. Ask never." There was no bitterness in his tone, just weary truth. Clara touched his arm. "I'm sorry," she said softly. "They were my husband's people once. I should have told them you were here." He turned to her sharply, eyes dark. "You tell I die, I know." Her voice cracked. "That's why I didn't." For a long moment, neither spoke. Then Taza's shoulders softened. "You brave," he said finally. "Many fear. You protect." Her throat ached. "You protected me first." The sun dipped below the ridge and the canyon fell into twilight. Taza stepped out from the shadows, scanning the horizon to make sure the riders were truly gone. Clara followed, shaken but steady. The desert had gone silent again, as if holding its breath. But something had changed between them, something neither of them could undo: trust, and beneath it something deeper, fragile as the first star appearing over the cliffs. The soldiers' hoofbeats had long faded into the desert distance, but their presence clung to the air like the aftertaste of smoke. The night came slow and heavy, bringing with it a restless silence. Clara sat near the low flicker of their new fire, her hands clasped tight in her lap. Across from her, Taza was sharpening his knife, the rhythmic scrape of metal against stone filling the quiet. The sound didn't frighten her anymore, but tonight, it stirred something uneasy inside. "You didn't sleep last night," she said softly. He didn't look up. "Apache sleep with one ear open." Clara tried to smile, but it faltered. "Because of the soldiers?" He stopped sharpening and lifted his gaze. His dark eyes met hers, steady, unreadable. "Because of trust." Her heart gave a small, sharp twist. "You don't trust me?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he set down the knife and leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "White woman trust words. Apache trust eyes." He pointed to his chest. "I see heart, not mouth." She understood what he meant, even if his English was broken. He wasn't accusing her, he was testing her, waiting to see what her heart would show. "I didn't tell them about you," she said quietly, "even when they were close enough to hear me breathe." He studied her a long moment. Then he nodded once, slow. "I know. You brave." The fire popped, sending a spark spiraling upward into the darkness. The desert night was cool, the wind carrying the scent of sage and ash. Clara pulled the blanket tighter around her shoulders, but the chill wasn't just from the air. It was from everything unspoken between them. Finally, she whispered, "I had a husband once. A soldier." Taza's brow lifted slightly, but he said nothing. "He died 3 winters ago," she continued. "I thought I'd follow him to the grave, until the fever passed, and I didn't. The others said I was cursed, being left alive." She gave a shaky laugh. "I believed them for a while." Taza's voice was quiet. "You not cursed. You strong." "No," she said, shaking her head. "Just lost." He watched her for a while and then asked, "Why you travel alone? Many women die on trail." Her throat tightened. "I was trying to find work, maybe a new home. But when my horse broke its leg, I didn't know what to do. I just kept walking until I couldn't anymore." His gaze softened. "And then you find me," she smiled faintly. "Or maybe you found me." For the first time that night, something like amusement flickered in his eyes. Maybe both. They sat in the quiet glow of the fire, something unspoken weaving between them, delicate but growing stronger with each word. But trust, like the desert wind, could shift in an instant. Without warning, a sudden sound split the night, a shout, faint but unmistakable, echoing from beyond the ridge. Clara froze, eyes wide. Taza was already moving, his hand going to his bow. "Stay," he ordered, voice low and sharp. Before she could protest, he slipped into the darkness like a shadow. The fire crackled, the night seemed to hold its breath, and Clara's chest filled with dread. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours before she saw movement again. Taza returning, silent and tense. "What is it?" she whispered. He crouched beside the fire, jaw tight. "Not soldiers, scout, from my people." Relief flooded her, then confusion. "That's good, isn't it?" Taza's eyes darkened. "Not good. They not trust white woman with Apache man. They think I betray my blood. Her heart sank. They'd hurt you because of me? He said nothing, only glanced toward the ridge where the moonlight painted the rocks in silver. His silence was answer enough. Clara's voice trembled. Then I should go. Taza turned sharply, his tone fierce. No, you go, you die. Tears stung her eyes. If I stay, you might die. He stepped closer, his voice low, urgent. You stay, I protect. My life, my choice. For a long, heavy moment, they stood in the dim firelight, two people bound by danger, by gratitude, and by something neither dared name. The desert wind carried the faint cry of a coyote, lonely and distant. Clara's whisper broke the silence. Taza, why would you risk everything for me? He met her gaze, and for the first time she saw the pain behind his calm. Because heart no choose who it protect. Her breath caught. The truth of it settled deep inside her, where words couldn't reach. And in that quiet, fragile space between them, trust finally stopped being something spoken. It became something felt. The morning broke with a chill that clung to the earth like a second skin. The canyon was still, quiet except for the faint trickle of water from the spring and the rustle of wind weaving through mesquite branches. Clara awoke to the sound of footsteps, light, deliberate, and not Taza's. Her heart jolted. When she sat up, 3 Apache men stood at the edge of the clearing watching her. Their faces were hard, painted in streaks of ochre and black. Spears gleamed in the morning light. Before she could speak, Taza stepped out from the trees, bow in hand but lowered in peace. Brothers, he called softly in Apache. The men turned toward him, and the tallest one, broad-shouldered with hawk feather braids, answered in a tone sharp with disbelief. Clara couldn't understand the words, but she didn't need to. The anger in their eyes said enough. Taza walked forward slowly, palms open. His voice was calm but firm, explaining, pleading maybe. The men barked questions at him. One pointed his spear toward her. She shrank back, clutching the blanket tighter around her. Then the tall warrior said something that made Taza's shoulders stiffen. His jaw clenched. Clara's breath caught. What are they saying? She whispered. Taza turned to her, eyes dark and troubled. They say you bring soldiers. Death follows white woman. They say I forget my people. She shook her head desperately. That's not true. I would never, I know, he said quietly. But they know, listen. The tall warrior spoke again, pointing toward the ridge. Taza replied, his tone rising. The argument grew sharper, words like flint and fire sparking between them. Finally, the other man spat at the ground and turned away. The 2 younger warriors followed, disappearing into the brush as silently as they'd come. When they were gone, Taza stood very still, staring after them. Clara stepped closer. What happens now? He didn't answer at first. Then, without looking at her, he said, They go tell my chief. Tonight he send for me. Send for you? Her voice trembled. What will he do? Taza turned then, his eyes full of a quiet sadness. He asked me choose, she frowned. Choose what? He hesitated, then said simply, my people. Or you. The word struck like a physical blow. Taza, no. He shook his head. If I choose you, they say I am traitor. They take my horse, my name. I become ghost to them. Her throat tightened. And if you choose them? He didn't speak, but the look in his eyes said enough. If he chose his people, she'd be left alone again. This time in a desert that had already tried to kill her once. Taza, she whispered, tears burning in her eyes. I never meant to bring this on you. I'll go before they come. His hand shot out, gripping her wrist, not rough but firm enough to make her stop. No, you not go, her heart hammered. They'll come for me. They'll come for us. He stepped closer, his voice low but fierce. Let them come. I not hide what I choose. The sun was rising higher now, washing the canyon in gold. The fire between them was no longer just danger, it was something alive, unyielding. Taza. Her voice trembled. Why? Why risk everything? He studied her face, his expression unreadable for a long moment. Then he said, almost in a whisper, because before you I fight for land, for tribe, for honor. He touched his chest. Now I fight for heart. Her breath hitched. She wanted to tell him not to, that she wasn't worth losing everything for. That love between them would never survive the world outside this canyon. But the words refused to come, because deep down she knew what he was saying wasn't just love. It was truth. As the wind stirred the dust around them, Taza lifted his chin toward the sun. Tonight I go to them. Speak with my chief. Clara reached for his hand. And if he says you must give me up? He turned to her then, the soft edge of a smile breaking through the storm in his eyes. Then I take you far, beyond river, beyond soldiers, beyond tribe, to where no one tell us how to love. Her breath trembled. And if they follow? He stepped close, his forehead almost touching hers. Then they follow the wind. And I am the wind. The canyon was silent except for their heartbeats, two rhythms slowly finding the same pace. And in that quiet, Clara realized something she hadn't dared before. She wasn't the one being rescued anymore, they were saving each other. The night came early, heavy with the weight of decision. The sky stretched vast and violet, stars blinking through thin clouds that drifted like ghosts. Clara sat alone by the fire, her hands twisting the edge of the blanket Taza had given her. Every flicker of flame made her heart flinch. Each spark felt like a countdown to something she couldn't stop. Taza had gone to meet his chief. He'd left without fear, but not without looking back. She'd seen it in the way he paused at the edge of the canyon, eyes lingering on her as if memorizing her face. He had whispered, "If I not come before sunrise, you go east. Follow the river. Don't wait," but Clara knew she wouldn't go. Not until she knew his fate. The desert around her breathed with uneasy silence. Every sound, the rustle of brush, the cry of a night bird, made her glance toward the ridge. She tried to distract herself, to think of anything but him, but every thought returned to the same truth. Somewhere out there, Taza was standing before men who would decide whether he lived or died for loving her. At that very moment, not far from the canyon, Taza stood before his people. The fire at the center of the camp burned bright, casting long shadows across the circle of warriors. Chief Dasan sat before him, his face lined with wisdom and weariness. Around them the men watched in silence, faces painted, eyes like flint. "You bring white woman," the chief said in Apache, his voice deep and steady. "You bring danger." Taza bowed his head in respect but did not kneel. "She not danger. She lost alone. She is soldier's woman," Dasan countered. "Her people bring war. Blood of my son still on the sand because of her kind." Taza's jaw tightened. "She not them." The chief's gaze hardened. "Then who is she to you?" Taza hesitated, but only for a heartbeat. Then he lifted his chin. "She is my heart." A ripple of murmurs passed through the circle. The fire snapped, sparks rising like spirits into the night. The chief's eyes narrowed. "You forget your blood for her?" Taza stepped forward, his voice fierce but respectful. "I forget nothing. My blood is Apache, my heart beats Apache. But my soul see her and know truth. She not enemy, she blessing." The chief was silent for a long moment, studying him. Then in a low tone he said, "You bring her here. She will face us with you." Taza shook his head instantly. "No, they kill her. If she is not enemy, she has nothing to fear." Taza's breath came hard. He knew what this meant. It was not a trial. It was a test of loyalty. If he refused, he would be exiled. If he agreed, Clara might not survive. But then he remembered her eyes, how they had looked at him with something no one in his tribe had ever given him before. Trust, without question. He straightened his shoulders. "I bring her," he said at last. Back at the canyon, Clara startled when she heard footsteps again. She turned, and there he was, emerging from the darkness, his face grim but determined. "Taza." She ran to him, but he stopped her with a gentle hand to her shoulder. "They want see you," he said quietly. Her breath caught. "Your people?" He nodded once. "They judge us together." "Judge?" she repeated faintly. He took her hand, his fingers rough but sure. "Whatever happened, we stand same." She hesitated, fear burning in her chest. "They might kill us both." Taza's eyes softened. "Then we die honest." For a long heartbeat, neither spoke. The fire crackled, wind stirring the embers into tiny glowing whirls between them. Clara looked into his eyes, steady, fierce, full of something beyond courage. Finally, she whispered, "Then I'll go with you." He nodded once, as if he'd known she would. Before dawn, they set out together across the sand. The stars were fading, and the first light of morning brushed the horizon with pale gold. Ahead, smoke from the Apache camp rose faintly into the cold sky. Taza squeezed her hand once before letting it go. Whatever happened, he said. No fear. She met his gaze, voice trembling. Not if you're beside me, and together, they walked toward the firelight, toward judgment, toward truth, toward whatever fate had written for them. The sky was gray with the last breath of night when Taza and Clara reached the Apache camp. Smoke drifted from the dying fires, curling through the cold dawn air. The land itself seemed to hold its breath as the two of them walked into the circle, side by side, unarmed, unafraid. The warriors rose as one, their faces unreadable. The women gathered at the edges, whispering in tones of disbelief. A white woman among them, no prisoner, no captive, but walking with one of their own as his equal. At the center, Chief Dasan waited by the great fire. His gaze moved from Taza to Clara, pausing on her torn dress and trembling hands. His expression did not soften. Taza bowed slightly. I come, as you say, Dasan nodded. And she? Taza turned to her. This is Clara. Clara swallowed hard, her voice shaking. I mean no harm. I only want to live. Dasan regarded her for a long, quiet moment. You walk far from your people, white woman. Yes, she whispered. And I found someone I wasn't meant to, but someone who saved me. The murmurs grew louder. Dasan lifted a hand and silence fell. You say he saved you, he said. But your people have taken many of mine. How do I know you will not bring them again? Clara looked around the circle, at the faces of men who had lost brothers, sons, husbands. She could feel their grief like heat against her skin, but something in her heart steadied. You don't, she said softly. You only know what you see. And all I can offer is this. She stepped closer to Taza, her voice trembling but sure. He could have left me to die. But he didn't. He shared his food, his fire, his trust. And now if you take his life because of me, then take mine too. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Taza turned sharply to her. No, she shook her head, eyes glistening. Yes, you said hearts don't choose who they protect. Then let mine protect you now. For a moment, the world was utterly still. Even the wind seemed to pause. Dasan's gaze flicked between them. Two souls from different worlds, standing against everything that should have kept them apart. Finally, the old chief spoke, his tone quiet but heavy with meaning. You speak truth, he said to Clara. And truth is rare. He turned to Taza. You would leave your people for her? Taza met his gaze without hesitation. If my people make me choose between life and heart, then I choose heart. Dasan's face was unreadable for a long, agonizing pause. Then he gave a slow nod, his voice dropping to a deep murmur. Then you are no longer bound to this fire. Go and may the spirits guide you both. Taza's breath caught. Chief? Dasan lifted a hand. A man must follow what calls him. But know this, son of the mountains, you will not return. Once you walk from this circle, the wind will carry your name away. Taza bowed his head deeply. Then the wind will carry my thanks. He turned to Clara and took her hand. She looked up at him, eyes wide with disbelief and emotion. He's letting us go? Taza's voice was soft. He's letting us live. Together they walked from the camp as dawn broke in full, a wash of gold spilling over the desert peaks. Behind them no one followed. Ahead the land stretched wide and open, untouched by judgment. When they reached the ridge, Clara stopped and looked back one last time. The fires of the Apache camp flickered faintly in the distance, fading with the morning light. Do you regret it? She asked quietly. Taza looked at her, the rising sun painting his face in gold and amber. No, he said simply. I have no tribe now, but I have home. He lifted the old woven blanket, the same one from that first night, and spread it across the sand. Clara smiled through her tears. Where will I sleep? She asked softly, echoing her words from long ago. Taza's answer came with a gentle smile. Beside me. She knelt next to him beneath the warming sun, the desert wind swirling around them, carrying away the last traces of who they had been. No walls, no borders, no tribes, only the heartbeat of the earth and two souls who had chosen love over fear. And beneath that same blanket, where it had all begun, they found what neither had before. Not shelter, not survival, but belonging.